Persona 5X is a gacha game, meaning it has stupid and dumb mechanics and is a waste of time. This is Akari from MintJoy Pictures. Okay. Alright. So, normally I don't tend to make these very quick and on-the-spot impression-styled reviews, but I really do want to discuss Persona 5X, because this is a game that's been on my mind for a very long time. For those who don't know, Persona 5X is a mobile gacha game based off of Persona 5. It was first announced way back in early 2023, which surprisingly was not actually developed by Atlus, rather a brand new studio, Black Wings Game Studio. Since then, there hasn't been much going on other than a couple of open betas. It wasn't until very recently that the game started being pushed for once again, and finally got released in some select regions. At first I mainly wanted to brush this game off and maybe check it out on a global release, but come on, it's a Persona 5 game. I'm pretty much obligated to share about this. So, just for fun, I decided to play the current version that's out now just to get an idea of what I and many of you would be getting into. This is overall going to be a very fast-paced kind of review, since the game is constantly being updated with new characters and story arcs. Now, I do want to clarify that the current version of this game is only for a few specific countries, meaning if you do end up trying this game out and making an account, just know it's very likely not going to work once an international release is out. With that said, here are some of my thoughts on Persona 5 The Phantom X. Before we start, I just want to say that if you're enjoying our productions or you want to see more Persona-related productions, please be sure to press that subscribe button. And while you're at it, be sure to check out our Patreon if you want to further help us fund for these ambitious projects. Anyway, on to the topic. Let me just start off by saying this. I have a very complicated relationship with these mobile gacha games. I had a fair share of them with games like Azur Lane, Blue Archive, and Genshin Impact, but these past few years I haven't really been interested in keeping up with them. I could go on all day on why I think gacha games are an absolute waste of time and money, but all you need to know is that I am not someone who likes these games anymore. So, call it surprising that when I started playing this game, it actually became really entertaining. Let's talk about the story. So you play as your typical silent protagonist who pretty much has a very normal and peaceful life. However, strange events are happening around you, with you getting in all these uneasy situations and want to be able to do something about it, but you just can't. That's until you meet this one owl named Ruferu, who pretty much just takes you to the metaverse, and it's there where you summon your persona. It's until here that you start to realize what's truly going on. The best way to describe this game and its use of palaces, the metaverse, and shadows is back to basics. We come back to more traditional palaces this time, with one ruler being in control of it with their own desires. However, the way they retrieve these desires seems to be a little more unique, in a fascinating way. These desires manifest through guilt and hopelessness, which can make said person wanting to hurt others, or even worse, as a way to cope with those emotions. It's a very interesting change, since the way you summon your persona is through having the will and control in your life in a sense. It's very similar to how P5 does the whole rebellion message, but it truly does feel like a more realistic take of these established rules. Very interesting stuff, and my god, at first you think the first antagonist, Kyuchi, is just a bit of a jerk because he's constantly pushing people. But no joke, he gets to the point where he almost kills people by pushing them off stairs, and injures one of your friends by pushing them onto the subway tracks. Worst of all, if you try to report him to the police or something, he just excuses it as an accident. While I'm not that far in on the story and have also been using a translator for this run, I'm honestly pretty impressed at how well the story goes. Also, can I at least give props to the writers for actually giving the palace rulers a bit of a motive for what they're doing? For example, in Kyuchi's case, we find out that one of the main reasons he's become who he is now is because one of our friends was able to beat him in a baseball game, making him humiliated for being beat by a child. This ultimately put a massive dent in his ego and goes as far as to hurt her in the palace. All until, well, the whole rebelling against the palace ruler and awakening their persona thing. It's all very familiar territory, which is what I really like most about this game. After several P5 spin-offs and experiments, it's honestly quite refreshing to take the storytelling presentation from where it all started. The second palace is also fantastic. It's about this one TV show host named Hiromu wanting to buy out a ramen restaurant and replace the recipes to a much inferior one. This, however, upsets Kanu, a classmate of ours, which brings us to work together with him to stop him. It's amazing how well this game executes its story, and this is coming from someone who pretty much skips every single cutscene in Genshin Impact. And might I add, I'm using a translator on top of all this. The characters are also very likable. Learning about how much passion Kanu has for the art of cooking ramen and his dedication to stopping Hiromu is very admirable. Oh, and that's not even mentioning how much I'm excited for the new characters. Kotone has officially become my favorite Persona character of all time. Just look at her design. With that said, however, the gameplay is where I'll be talking the most about. So the gameplay is, well, very similar to Persona 5. You mainly progress through a story mode and are able to roam around the maps, buy items, fight enemies, the usual. What's really fascinating is how much of it is decently adapted to the gacha system. The game is surprisingly very reminiscent of P5's to an almost scary degree. So in this game you can of course use your persona, level up your party members, and will need to get stronger the more you progress through the game. The combat feels like a more fast-paced take on P5's. You can still use your persona and use different skills, with your main goal having to use enemies' weaknesses to your advantage. Here's where it gets interesting, however. So let's say an enemy is weak to Bufu, I just use a spell that can exploit that. Normally in P5 you get another go at the enemy, or can do what's called a baton pass, a turn in which you can pass on to another character. Here, however, you are sort of forced to make a baton pass to a different character. By doing this, they'll automatically make a move based on what their persona specializes in. So basically, if I hit an enemy with Bufu, I can do a baton pass with Morgana, who will automatically do a Garo skill. It sounds sort of confusing, and believe me, it is at first, but you do get used to it. Also, this is just as easy to abuse like the main games, so that's fun to know. One very special addition made here are the new idol characters. They're basically your navigators like Fuka, Rise, and Futaba. What's different is that you actually have control over their skills, some of which can be pretty useful, like buffs and damage or defense. You'll definitely want to keep these as well built as your character is actually fighting, because they can make a big difference if done right. As a whole, the game is really just Persona 5's turn-based gameplay, both simplified but also improved upon. There's a lot of different things you can do too. So you have the option to progress the main story, which will be handing you a new dungeon to explore, mementos, which is pretty much meant to be an endless era for you to fight enemies, bosses, and collectibles. Ooh, there's also the mini-boss minigames from PS5R, where you can get the highest score based on certain conditions like specific weaknesses or finishing in a set amount of turns. This is by far one of my favorite modes because it really pushes the limits of your team and your skill as a player. Sure, the ones in P5R are better, but I feel like you can customize your team much more in this game, making it very entertaining to see what works. There's also this other mode where you can set up a team and need to defeat about 3 bosses in one sitting. It's just as fun as well, though it can be very demanding at times. Not to mention it works like a limited time event with new enemies rotating every few days. There's also all the new modes you can do, and sadly, this is where a lot of the gacha mechanics come in. So in order to upgrade the gear and levels of your characters, you need certain materials. You get them through these mini challenges that spend a bit of your stamina, which in the end can still automatically regenerate. You can get books to level up your characters, their skills, weapons, and even actual personas. And I forgot to mention, you can in fact use personas in this game. It works just as you'd expect. If anything, it actually feels more accessible since it can help you with what combinations you need to get if you want a very specific one. I personally adore this edition since it always has been a challenge to guess what personas confuse to what. Yes, there's the whole fusion calculator, but it's best to have these kinds of things in-game. As I was saying though, there's a ton of these different challenges for the materials, but they're really not that hard. They just give you 2 waves of enemies, and by the end you can spend however much stamina you have to get your rewards. Gacha games do this all the time. Genshin is one of the most famous examples to do this kind of stuff. Another one of the modes you get later down the line is the Door of Nightmares. This is basically the Velvet Trials, but not only is it way harder, you can also use characters from other players. I've tried this mode, but barely made it past 200,000 points, which is like one of the first reward goals you can make. It's that hard. To put it into perspective, this is my best party so far. I've been playing this game non-stop for the past week, and while I have yet to work on some proper artifacts for them, characters like Katone have been doing great so far. But yes, you heard me. There is in fact an artifact system. For those unaware, artifacts in gacha games are these pieces of equipment that have different stat increases, whether it be attack, defense, or chance of hitting criticals. The main problem gameplay-wise is just how convoluted it can be, combining the fact you want the best possible stats, not to mention the different sets, the fact under those stats that they're substats, which by leveling up can randomly screw you over. So yeah, artifacts suck. And sadly, that is my biggest problem with this game. I haven't even gotten to that point, but I am very sure most of my time will be spent on getting the best possible gear for my characters. Though there's still a lot of good found in this game. Like, alright, can I just say that I'm in love with the brand new palaces? I barely touched upon them, but now's a perfect time. Let me just say these new palaces are huge. They have multiple floors, very good puzzles, and a ton of collectibles scattered around. Believe me when I say you will not be able to finish these in one sitting. It's insane how well designed it is and how well it all comes together. That's not even getting into the themes of these palaces. Koichi has a palace completely themed around sports. You have a big museum with the awards, a club, and by the end, you fight Kyuchi in a giant baseball field. I don't know about you, but I don't think we've ever had this sort of style for a palace, jail, or whatever Toshiro has. For what I expected to be a simplified form of P5's locations, this is seriously well crafted. Same goes for Hiromu. While this is the 3rd location to have an ancient Japan setting, they surprisingly made it one of my favorite iterations of it. It's straight up just Akane's studio. I mean, it's a film studio. That's enough of the main dungeon and palace exploring out of the way. How's the social link and school life side of things? Well, it's quite an interesting take, honestly. So, in Persona 5, you can of course move around areas like Shibuya. What's different, however, is most of the activities you'd be doing, like having a job, social stats, and links, are done in this little menu. Here you use one of these hourglass stamina points in order to do said activity. 5 refresh every day, so it's good to be using them. It's easily one of the most underwhelming systems integrated here. It really does feel like the game just wants you to do the usual dungeon exploring, while this is more of a bonus. Even the social links feel like a bit of an afterthought in my opinion. So the way it works is you can of course hang out with characters you meet along the story and get rewards out of them. These rewards range from materials used to pull for characters to useful abilities. You definitely want to prioritize these since they only appear in the city activities and are at random. You can, however, buy gifts, and if it's something said character likes, it'll increase your chances of leveling up their link. There's also several side requests you can do as you're following the main story. One of my favorites is just one where you help this cat find some treasures. They're all pretty fun and do help balance out the game from all the fighting you do. You can also buy items like medicine, weapons, and that's not all. There's actual mini-games on here too. My favorite of these being the rhythm game in the music club. You can actually play songs from the game's soundtrack there. Which, on the topic, can I just say I'm in love with the game's OST? I've been wishing for a soundtrack that is just more P5 music. P5X is just that. I'd go as far as to say I love the battle themes more in here than in vanilla. You have tracks that feel more action-packed, like Wake Up Your Hero. Then you have songs that are more laid-back, but makes you feel like an absolute badass, like Last Strike and Shadow Loop. Seriously, this is a fantastic lineup. P5X certainly seems to have the most variety in terms of battle themes, all of which are amazing to listen to both in-game and on their own. Graphically, this game's pretty much P5 as well, albeit with a few changes. The game definitely feels more graphically intensive with better lighting and effects. Even if you don't like the idea of this game being on mobile, you just can't deny that there's been so much love and passion poured into it. The art style, the story, the gameplay. Heck, all of the playable characters have their own all-out attack screen. All of it feels like it was made from people who understood what made P5 so enjoyable for so many people. With that said, there's one last thing I want to talk about. The future of Persona 5X. You know, trying to make a production on a mobile game is not exactly easy. While I am praising and enjoying this game a lot right now, there's no telling where it can end up later down the line. And as of the time I'm recording this, we have 2 completely new characters added to the roster and rumors going around that the rest of the Phantom Thieves like Yusuke and Makoto will appear soon. Don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for the future of this game and I'm willing to stick around to see who else they add. The problem I and many others have is how, well, scummy this game could be in the future. Will we have characters so broken you need to have them in order to proceed to Palace? Will we have a million new artifact sets? Will characters have skills that are the length of a novel? Sadly, it kind of does feel like that'll be the case. Even some of the best and friendliest gacha games like Azure Lane have this problem. It's just normal for a game to experience what's called power creep once it's been around for so long. You want people to spend money for this character, right? What can you do to incentivize players to get them? Make them overly powerful, of course. With P5X, though, it's a little more complicated. Yes, we already have that some kind of issue with Joker currently being insanely busted, but something's telling me that Atlas wouldn't want to go the same route as other games. I don't see them going as friendly like Azure Lane, but definitely not be the worst in the industry like Genshin. I've spoken with a lot of people on what they think could happen. It's been a very split discussion. Some don't mind it, some will have an issue with it, others are just waiting for the game to release globally. In the end, should you play Persona 5X? Well, that's something I think is really up to you to decide. Do remember that this is, after all, a mobile game. It'll pretty much do anything to get you to spend more money on it. If you are willing to look past all that and just want some new and back-to-basics Persona 5 gameplay, then that just might be a solid pick. I would suggest waiting for the global release, though. Last thing I'd want is knowing all my progress will be completely irrelevant once that time comes. At least it's better than Tactica.